I think the person who invented horror movies must have had real psychological problems. What benefit is there spending hours watching vampires, werewolves, decapitated heads with arteries spurting blood? Horror movies are just a waste of time, and I'm sick of constantly seeing them on TV. Do you think these horror movies affect our heart and nerves? Will they somehow bring about our deaths in due course? My name is Melina. I am 15 years old. My mom died during childbirth when my brother Martin was born. It was my responsibility to take care of him. My friends called me Melina the Horrible because I really hated horror movies. Even if they only had a smattering of corpses, scary monsters, an insane madman wearing masks and stabbing people at random acts of cruelty. Creators of these movies had to be deranged. We really don't need those kinds of movies. There's enough cruelty and misery in the real world as it is. They did humanity no favor. My friends all made fun of me. They said I was just a coward. But that wasn't it. They just don't get it. It was impossible for them to change my mind, though, but they never stopped trying. Then, one day, I had to face a horror that was all too real. Before that day, I was preparing to submit a drawing for the school exhibition. I had worked on that drawing for more than 2 years. I wanted to win the Best Artist Award of the year. It was on this fateful day, after I had finished my masterpiece, that my nightmare unfolded right before my eyes. I woke up to the sound of my alarm clock. I had overslept an hour and was late for school. I grabbed a shirt that I had washed the night before, but it was still all wet. I tried to iron it, but I burned a hole in it instead because I was in such a hurry. I was literally running out of time, so I grabbed a t-shirt instead. I packed some breakfast in a bag, took my drawing, and ran to school. I was so focused on rushing to school that I didn't notice the mud pile up ahead, or the car coming from the side road, until it drove right through the puddle and splashed muddy water all over me. Well, at least my drawing was safe. Finally, I got to school, but the outside door was locked, and I couldn't get in. Frantic, I knocked on the door, and the school security guard looked at me through the small hole in the door. I told him that I was late for the exhibition and needed to get in quick. He looked at me with suspicion, but thankfully he opened the door. The principal was standing there with him, eyeing me through her thick glasses and asking me why I was so late. I told her that I was running late for the art exhibition and that I couldn't speak now, but that I would come to her office afterwards and fully explain myself. Without a moment to lose, I headed towards my classroom. Suddenly, I heard a sound as if the herd of elephants were coming my way. The lesson had just ended. Everyone was moving to their next class. I was like a pebble tossed in stormy seas, jostled right and left. Then the flood hit my drawing, carrying it downstream only to fall on the floor and get trampled on. I watched in shock as the whole disaster happened. I spent the rest of the school day sitting quietly at my desk. I didn't do any classwork, didn't feel like talking to anyone either. At the end of the day, after all the students had gone home, I was sitting alone in the schoolyard, watching the sunset. The guard told me that I needed to go home because he had to lock up. So, I got up and started walking. My home was a good distance away from school. I had no money for a bus or a taxi, so I had to hoof it home. Then, I came to a street that had been roadblocked. Workers were working on the road, and I couldn't pass through, so I had to take a detour around the roadblock and somehow ended up walking down a dark street. I didn't like dark roads. Maybe I should have just waited for the workers to finish their work. But then again, it would have been quite late. I continued down the dark road. I knew Dad would be worried, so I hurried along. It was just a dark road, nothing to be afraid of. I mean, it's not like I believe in horror movies. What am I afraid of anyway? What's the worst that can happen? Suddenly, I heard a sound on the other side of the street. It sounded like a voice moaning in pain. I ignored it and continued on my way, walking a little more quickly now. Then, the moaning sound turned into a snarl, and I heard footsteps behind me. I sped up my pace. I imagined the dark shadow following me, was gaining in on me, getting closer and closer. Could it be a ghost? A dead spirit? I stopped, and so did the footsteps. I felt their presence awfully close, so I turned around to face it. I saw a blue face, sunken shadows of the eyes, a stiff body, fangs in the mouth. A zombie! My brain screamed. I felt the blood drain from my face. I screamed. He snarled, and I ran. As I was running, another zombie appeared in front of me, trapping me between the two of them. What should I do? I had to do something. So, with all my strength, I swung my bag around in a circle and struck the one in front of me. He fell to the ground, and I ran past him, and I heard snarling again on the other side of the street. This must be a dream, I thought, but unfortunately, it was all too real. I kept running. Groups of zombies were gathering everywhere. Their appearances were disgusting and terrifying at the same time. I never want to see horror movies, but now they had decided to come to me instead. I ran, fell down, got back up, and ran some more. The street seemed really long. Suddenly, I saw a huge zombie crossing the road and getting in front of me. He was larger than the rest and had a large hunting knife stuck in his head. I screamed and fell down, slowly moving backwards, trying to keep my distance from him. Soon, I was surrounded by two of them again. This really wasn't my day at all, and it was going to end up with me being zombie meal. I thought of Dad and my friends and what they would think about me being eaten by the thing I despise most. Zombies broke out through the hedges and surrounded me. The big zombie pulled the knife out of his head and prepared to stab me, but I made the heroic effort and grabbed the knife from his hand and stabbed him with it instead. But the knife crumbled. It was paper, and unexpectedly, all the zombies gathered round and removed their faces, and all my friends shouted, "Happy Halloween!" I was angry and mortified, and relieved. They praised me for my courage and apologized for pranking me. They had told passers-by to avoid this dark street so that they could pull their prank. They even enlisted some volunteers to help them with the prank. I was still in mild shock, waiting for my breathing and heartbeat rates to return to normal. To comfort me, they presented me with a zombie doll as a memento of this night. After I finally got home, I told Dad about the whole thing, and he rolled over the floor laughing. I was so glad this day was over. I was right. None of it was real. Just that second, something made me glance at the zombie doll, and it turned its head to stare at me.
How I found out that I was adopted was both odd and dramatic. Odd because I found out in a hotel room while the plumbing at home was being fixed. Dramatic because, well, finding out the parents you've known for 14 years weren't really your parents, tears were bound to ensue. There were clue signs when I was a kid that I wasn't related to anyone I grew up with. First of all, although people told me I looked like my parents, I never really saw the resemblance. Second, prior to my first birthday, I didn't really have any pictures of me as a toddler. And third of all, though you might think this is irrelevant, but I think it plays a part. I'm an only child. Either I was just oblivious, or that I was already so part of the family that it didn't really matter. When I was in grade 2, we learned about baptism in religion class. I went to a Catholic school and religion was part of the curriculum. Our teacher began that lesson by giving us this assignment. Bring your baptismal certificate and a baptismal photo to class. The next day, I was the only kid in class who didn't bring either one. It wasn't like I didn't try. I asked my grandmother where they were because I needed them for class. I remember a brief look of panic flash before her face. So I just shrugged it off. I don't know where they are, she said. I'll call your mom and ask her. My parents were working abroad in America at the time. I grew up with my grandparents in a tiny island in the Philippines. My grandfather passed away when I was 4, and ever since it was my strict but caring grandmother and a string of maids raising me. Summers were the month I looked forward to the most because it meant two things, my birthday and my parents visiting. I was your typical Filipino child with overseas parents. So when my grandmother got off from a long-distance call with my mother and told me that they had my baptismal certificate and photos with them in New York, I wasn't suspicious. I simply restated what she told me to my teacher, who had me look over a classmate's baptismal certificate and photos. When I was a little bit older, I had a dream. I'm the type of person who remembers her dreams. So this particular dream had stayed with me for so many years. Even now, I still remember it. I was at home in the living room, playing with my favorite dollhouse. A woman entered the picture. I remember a mass of dark curly hair and a blue dress. I didn't know her, but at the same time, she looked so familiar. She plopped down on the floor next to me and began to play with me. And then she told me that she was going to take me away. Why? Because she was my mother. I woke up then, was confused for a few minutes, but then I shrugged it off. I must have been watching too much of my grandmother's dramatic soap operas. My father returned to the Philippines to help raise me when I turned 10. I was never particularly close to him anyways. I didn't talk to him much and I avoided spending time with him. Looking back now, I realized that I gave him such a hard time when he was only trying to be a good dad. I have to admire him for never giving up. In those years, I slowly became a daddy's girl, and I still am. He's serious and strict, but has his funny moments. My mother remained in New York, but now tried her very best to visit twice a year rather than once. In 6th grade, again in religion class, we were taught that names were important. They gave us our identities. What did our names mean? How did our parents come to name us? We looked up our names in a dictionary. Mine meant woman of purity. Another definition said simple. That night, I asked my grandmother to call my mother long distance so I could ask her why she gave me my name. Why did you choose my name? I asked her, pencil poised on the page of my religion notebook, ready to take notes. Why did I choose your name? She repeated. Yeah, I replied. I looked up my name and it said woman of purity and simplicity. So why did you choose my name? She was silent for a moment before saying, I don't know. Let me call you back. We said goodbyes and we hung up. I thought that was odd, but I shrugged it off. It was no big deal. If you're still interested in how I found out I was adopted, or why did my mom choose my name, stay tuned for the second part.
Being famous is a dream for most people, but achieving this particular dream is not easy. It takes a lot of perseverance, and maybe even some luck. Listen to my story. My name is Rona, and I'm 18 years old. I live with my mom and my sister. My dad passed away long ago. We live in a very poor neighborhood, where drug dealing and death are everywhere. My mom is a nurse, but even so, her salary is barely enough to make ends meet. I have always wanted a better life. I often admired famous people, like singers and actors, and I imagined myself living in their world of fame and glamour. What I would give to be a famous person like them. I had a dream. I wanted to be a clothes designer or a fashion model. I would draw different styles of clothes and stand in front of the mirror, posing like a model. I just knew that my clothes would fit perfectly. But here's the thing. I wasn't thin enough to be a model. This was the obstacle between me and my dream, so I decided to go on a diet while searching for a job. One day, I read the news about some famous clothes designer and learned that a fashion show was going to be held near my area soon. Within a week, they would be holding an audition to select some local models, so I saw an opportunity to enter the competition, get selected as a model, and make my dream come true. I did everything I could to lose weight. When the audition day came, I tried to get in the fashion show, but the security guards wouldn't let me pass because I looked too ordinary. So I went home, dressed up like a princess, and then returned, looking more important. I was allowed in. I saw many fit girls with nice slim figures. They were so beautiful and seemed so enthusiastic about the audition and their chances of being selected. I felt like I was watching a fashion magazine photo shoot. I signed up for the audition. One by one, the girls performed in front of the judges. Some came out sad, and some came out ecstatic. After seeing this fierce competition, with many beautiful girls being turned down, I lost hope and turned around to leave. That was when I bumped into a woman. Her name was Linda. I excused myself and said, "I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention." Linda replied, "It's okay. Are you one of the competitors?" "Yes, I wanted to, but seeing all these beautiful girls, I don't think I have a chance. Goodbye." "No, you shouldn't give up so easily," she said. Her kind manner persuaded me to turn around and try out for the audition anyway. As I walked onto the stage, I noticed that Linda was one of the judges. She winked at me as our eyes met. I did my best. Once my audition was over, I looked at Linda, and she smiled and gestured with her head that I had done well. However, one judge told me that my performance was good, but my figure was not. I needed to lose more weight. Linda told me that I was put on a list of potential models with the stipulation that I could re-audition if I lost more weight, so I buckled down and really hit the diet hard. I began starving myself. Mom felt miserable watching what I was putting myself through. I managed to lose about 40 kilos. Unfortunately, I had become so thin so quickly that my health began to suffer. I started feeling depressed and even got dizzy at times. When the next audition day came, I entered the audition room and once again met Linda. She looked at me with worry on her face and said, "What have you done to yourself?" "You told me to do my best, so I did," I said. I walked onto the stage. The judge who had told me to lose more weight saw me and was shocked. He asked me, "How were you able to lose so much weight so fast?" When I began my performance, my weakness caused some dizzy spells, which caused my modeling motions to be unsteady and awkward. Linda was clearly worried. As she watched my performance, as if she expected me to fall at any moment, the judges gave me poor marks, and I was rejected as a potential model. I was greatly disappointed because I had tried so hard. I said to the judges, "But I followed your instructions and lost more weight." The one judge said, "Yes, you lost more weight, but then you let your performance suffer as a result." Then I passed out and woke up later in a hospital bed. Mom and my sister and Linda were waiting at my bedside. I asked them what had happened. "You're too weak. You fainted on stage," Linda explained. Suddenly her phone rang, and after she answered and listened for a moment, I heard her say, "What? Oh no." After she hung up, I asked her what had happened. She told me that the plane carrying the judges and the competitors had crashed. There were no survivors. They would have to start the whole competition and selection process all over again. Though I was saddened by the tremendous loss of life in the plane crash, I chose to interpret this as a sign from above that I had another chance to achieve my dream, that I should not give up. With Linda's guidance and advice during my rehabilitation program, I was able to achieve an optimum weight with good health. Fate and my perseverance had given me a second chance, and I would not waste it. I am now ready and determined to try again. I am addicted to food. I suffer a lot. I need help. I've tried to give up, but I fail every time. Hamburgers. Who can give up eating hamburgers, especially with barbecue sauce? I didn't mind this kind of addiction, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me begin by introducing myself. I am Patricia, 15 years old, living with my parents and my brother. I lead a quiet life. No interests, no hobbies, except for eating, that is. Food is my faithful friend. It never leaves me. It is my partner, my soulmate. But having food as your soulmate has insidious side effects. A dark side, if you will. It denies me a healthy life, robs me of the energy to play, and causes me to sleep excessively. I would much rather stay at home with a bag of potato chips than go out and exercise. My soulmate ultimately betrayed me, though, last Thanksgiving at my granny's home. She lives in a state nearby. Granny was a clever doctor and an excellent cook at that. She could conjure up something really delicious. On that day, she had prepared barbecue turkey with nuts and other secret recipe ingredients. The taste was so great, as if it had descended from heaven itself. I felt like I was fighting a food war, and I had to win at all costs. I ate and ate and ate. I don't know why, but I just couldn't control myself. I attacked that turkey like it was the last on the planet. But every culinary war with a worthy adversary, such as the barbecued turkey, has its own unique type of casualties. Suddenly, I found myself unable to breathe. I fell to my knees and passed out. The turkey had won. I woke up later in the hospital, though, still clinging to an unfinished turkey leg. The doctor told me that I was gaining way too much weight. He said that I should be put on a diet. Diet? Man, how I hated that word. It hung over my head like the sword of Damocles. It meant depriving me of my passion, my reason for living. I considered eating vegetables in small amounts to be the worst form of cruel and unusual punishment, the worst form of torture imaginable. Imagine thinking of a wonderful, greasy, cheese-laden pizza with all the toppings and then suddenly opening your eyes to find a healthy green salad bowl. But I had reached a turning point in life. One day, my brother was playing on the street, while I was sitting at home gazing longingly at a tempting piece of cheesecake, just sitting there, taunting, daring me to eat it. I struggled mightily to resist the urge, but in the end I succumbed and wolfed it down like a starving animal. Shortly afterwards, I began feeling dizzy, but I was unable to call for help this time, and then I passed out again. I was taken to the hospital. While lying in the hospital bed, half conscious, I overheard the doctor say to someone, "She needs to stop eating or it will be the death of her." I thought to myself, whoa, death? So I made up my mind right then, right there. I resolved to fight a new war, a war against my appetite. On our way back home, I told my father that I wanted to see a nutritionist. He was delighted to hear that. Later, at the clinic, the doctor welcomed us in. She told me how to overcome my eating fetish. She gave me a strict diet regimen with a schedule full of healthy meals. I kept telling myself that winning this war was possible. I simply had to be patient and persevere. I stuck to the strict diet and did some physical workouts. My parents supported me wholeheartedly. I was enthusiastic. I can totally do this. A week passed quickly, and I eagerly visited the doctor to receive some good news. When the doctor weighed me and told me that my weight hadn't changed at all, I was crestfallen. She looked at me and asked me, how was this possible? I told her I didn't know, because I was following her diet thoroughly, though it did require a tremendous effort on my part. Another week passed, and again I went to the doctor. The results were the same. She said to me, "Patricia, are you sure you're following the diet I prescribed for you?" I said yes. She sat there wondering. Then she told me with a puzzled look on her face, "It's odd, but your weight is increasing, not decreasing." This unexpected piece of news mystified me. Another week passed. No change. The doctor was nonplussed. I returned home with a dejected look on my face. My father asked me what was wrong. And when I told him, he laughed. Do you believe that? My father actually laughed at my predicament. I was furious. He gestured an apology with his hand and then told me that it was my own fault. I was puzzled. What are you talking about? He told me that I had been sleepwalking to the refrigerator every night and eating everything in sight. I was taken aback. I couldn't believe it. "Stop acting like you didn't know it," he said. "You must have been awake." I replied, "No, Father, I'm not acting. I was truly unaware that I've been sleepwalking and eating in my sleep." But now that we've finally solved the mystery of the increasing weight, we returned to the doctor with this new information and told her the situation. She laughed and told me that my discipline had denied my body the food it craved, but my brain had refused to cooperate and had overridden my will by urging me to eat in a subconscious state. She told me not to worry, though, that she could treat that. Armed with this knowledge and her support, and the support of my family, I felt that I could finally win this war. Some people live their lives not fully appreciating what others do for them. They start taking things for granted, thinking that that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Parents sacrifice a lot for their children, and when the children appreciate and try their best in life, that would be worth more than any words can ever describe. My name is Megan, and I hope to inspire you with my story. I lived with my father and my sister, Marlene, after the death of my mother, who died from an illness. Though I was only 18 at the time, I became responsible for taking care of the whole family. I did everything for them: cooking, cleaning, washing. My father was a great man, and he did his best to make us happy. I supported both my sister and my father. We faced everything together. There was one more person in my life, my neighbor, Dave. We practically grew up together. and our dreams grew with us. He knew everything about our circumstances and supported me often. He proposed to me and we got engaged. Dave chose a flat near my family so we would be close to them. That was very thoughtful of him. We got married and started our lives. I was determined to finish college, and Dave helped me in every way that he could. He proved to me every day how responsible and considerate he was. One day, while cleaning the house, my heart started beating rapidly, and I couldn't breathe well. I was barely able to call out to Dave, who came immediately when he heard me cry for help. I had had this symptom before, when I was younger, but I never told my father, because I didn't want to worry him. Dave took me to the hospital, where a doctor said that I had a serious heart condition, and not just that, I was pregnant too. Pregnancy and a heart condition do not make a good combination, so we had to choose between the baby's life and mine. My father and Dave asked me to abort the child. Though they tried really hard to persuade me, I resolutely refused. I agonized a lot during my pregnancy. They were also worried for my safety. My father and Marlene left their flat to come and live with me, and Dave cut back on his working hours to stay with me. When the day came, they took me to the hospital. The doctor checked the condition and said that it was too serious, that I wouldn't be able to survive the childbirth. My family and I were shocked. I held Dave's hand and told him that I was strong enough to make it. Dave hugged me and cried. I was so afraid, but I did my best to hide it. I said to my baby, "I'm trying the best I can. I'm fighting so that both of us could have a life. Know that I love you, and I know that you'll grow up to be very successful, but you'll also be caring and kind." Hi, my name is Selena. I'm 19 years old, and I'm just crazy about basketball. I follow all the sports news, the star players, and the league statistics. I know the names of all the famous players around the world. My friends were amused by this because their interests ran more towards makeup, fashion, singers, and movie stars. I thought those girl things were just outright vain, shallow, frivolous, and downright silly to tell the truth. The college's basketball team coach was forced to take leave due to a chronic illness, leaving the team without a coach. Due to my high school reputation and widely recognized basketball expertise, I was asked if I wanted to serve as the basketball team's temporary coach. I had always dreamed of someday becoming a coach for a famous basketball team, so I jumped at the opportunity. School leagues presented opportunities for players to show what they've got and maybe get scouted by a professional league team. It was also my chance to start as a college basketball coach. By studying the opposing team's previous games, I analyzed their strategies and learned their strengths and weaknesses. I was able to excel and drive my team to an undefeated streak of winnings. We won the college league championship. I was selected to train a team in a professional league with another famous coach. It was an incredible opportunity for me to up my game a notch. During this time, I met an opposing team's coach named Jacob, who was something of a genius when it came to winning basketball strategies. He shared the same dreams as mine. He bragged that his team was better than mine. Well, I couldn't ignore the gauntlet he threw at my feet, so I challenged him to a game. My team against his, in the upcoming season, and may the best team win. If my team won, he would acknowledge me as a superior coach, and vice versa. The season began, and both our teams began beating all our opponents. I used these victories to hone my coaching skills to the next level. Both our teams were undefeated until the day we were to face each other in a championship game. The game began, and both teams played hard. We stayed closely matched the entire game. In the final few seconds of play, one of their players got past our defense. He scored a buzzer beat. I was crushed and began to cry, but my team's fans in the stadium broke into a loud applause. They began chanting my name, acknowledging that I have given them a great competitive, entertaining game. Jacob came over to me. I figured he came to gloat, but instead, he got down on one knee and presented me with an engagement ring. I was in shock. The stadium cheered even louder. I may have lost the game that day, but for some reason, I felt like a winner. Our feelings are always hard to control. We are humans after all. Sometimes we do things we can't explain, just because we feel that way. I had a student named Daniel, a sweet and innocent child. I was prepared to do anything for him, but don't judge me just yet. First, let me tell you my story. My name is Jolene. I'm a 21-year-old math teacher at a primary school. I live with my sister and my mother. My house was next to the school where I work. I love teaching, and I like teaching the students in creative ways. They loved me, and I loved them. Daniel was a special student, though. Our story began at the start of the new year. It was the first day of school. I missed all my students over the summer break. I missed them so much that I stood by the door to welcome them back. Before I started my first lesson, Mr. Smith, the student affairs officer, knocked on the class door, with Daniel hiding behind his back. Mr. Smith greeted the class and asked them to greet Daniel, but Daniel was too shy and didn't move. So I went over to him to take him by the hand, but he pulled his hand away, which embarrassed Mr. Smith. I asked him to greet his classmates, so he went and he stood in front of the class and he said, "Hello, I am Daniel." Then he went and he sat at the very back of the class. He didn't talk much with the other kids. He didn't like to interact with anyone. Daniel always looked sad, and I thought to myself, he's only 8. What could possibly have made him that way? I tried to get close to him, but he resisted all my efforts. Sometimes he looked like he was hiding some big secret, and later on, I learned what it was. One night, when I was surfing the social media, I came across a horrible news story about a jealous husband killing his wife and another man right in front of his son. The child had been none other than my new student Daniel. Reading that sad story, I started understanding why Daniel was acting that way. I decided to try brightening his life a little. Every day, I would buy a small present and put it on his desk. At first, it had no effect, but slowly he came to love that. During break time, I would sit beside him, and we would share food together. I would get him involved in class activities. On his birthday, I arranged a surprise party with his class, his grandmother, and myself. He was so happy that day. After the party, he hugged me and he told me that he loved me. I hugged him tightly. He was not just a student to me. I treated him like he was my own son. He told me that he wanted to call me mother, and that made me so happy. After his grandmother died, he came to live with me. We faced a lot of problems together, but I followed his success in life with pride. Daniel is all grown up now. He's graduating from the Faculty of Engineering. I am so proud of what he has made of himself.
Before I got on the plane from Barcelona to Tokyo, I emailed the friend I was staying with. Please do not be shocked by my appearance. I look a little bit different. Also, I won't have any money when I arrive. So if you can help me sort it out, that would be great. The stitching on my face looked like someone had killed a black spider but left the corpse there. My appearance was shocking. I gasped with horror whenever I accidentally glimpsed at myself in the mirror. And that was before I even registered that it was me looking back. My face got worse on the plane ride to Tokyo. Whether it was just the cabin pressure or the time that was the bruises take to bloom, but my friend meeting me at a hotel in Tokyo blanched when he saw me. My eyes were black and swollen shut. One side of my face was also swollen and bruised, and a long line of black, badly stitched thread ran down my right temple to my brow. I had been assaulted and robbed in Barcelona a few days before, which resulted in 2 black eyes, a swollen jaw, and a fractured skull, now dented and stitched together by an exhausted intern who would never win a prize for the neatness of his craft work. My friend in Tokyo was a lawyer who dealt with the complexities of transitional airline leases and wore tailored suits. We made an odd-looking couple as we went from bank to bank with my passport, trying to get money out or get money wired or just access it somehow. In his flawless Japanese, he negotiated on my behalf as I stood there, my face a grotesque mask. But each time we were rebuffed. In a chilled Starbucks, my friend brought me an iced coffee, which I drank through my straw, and my jaw still hurt, and said, "The people in the bank probably think I beat you up, and I'm trying to drain your bank accounts. That's what it looks like." We tried one more bank, and when they said no, tears burst with some difficulty from my swollen eyes. And the sight might have been so weird and sad that they finally said yes. The rest of the time in Tokyo, I didn't leave my friend's flat. I was anxious and exhausted, and had started to dream of the assault and shattered and jumbled fragments. In the day when I should have been exploring Tokyo, I lay on the couch in the cool, dark flat and watched reruns of the Dawson's Creek.
You know, sometimes the truth is even stranger than fiction, especially if you had a dark secret in your life that would put you in danger if it were exposed. Such was my case, and this is my story. My name is Charlotte, and I'm 17 years old. I live with my mom. My dad passed away before I was born, so my mom had to raise me all by herself. My mom knew everything about me, my school studies, my friends. She had certain rules that I was supposed to follow, like eating outdoors was forbidden, and I can't be friends with someone unless she knew everything about them first, and so on. I thought these rules were somewhat paranoid, and I asked her why she placed such restrictions on making friends. Her reply was simply that you can't trust anyone nowadays. But that wasn't a very satisfying answer. And when I asked her what it meant, she didn't say anything further. As I was growing up, these rules mystified me even more, and I couldn't help but wonder if they had anything to do with my father, whom I knew nothing about. Mom always said he was a troublemaker, and she told me that everything would be clear to me in time. One holiday, I joined a new band. We held a lot of concerts. It was the best. I was good at playing music and singing. When we went camping, we met some students from other countries. We made a lot of new friends and had fun together. We even had a chance to increase our band's fame and reputation. After our first performance at camp, an Asian girl approached me. She hugged me, saying, "Charlotte, I missed you a lot." Taken aback, I asked, "Do I know you?" She surprised me again by saying, "Don't you recognize me? I'm Mary, your friend." I smiled and replied, "You must be mistaken. I don't know you." After insisting that she was indeed my friend, she excused herself and ran back to join her friends. Weird. Though, now that I think about it, I have often had an eerie feeling that someone was watching me wherever I went. I tried to shake off this feeling many occasions, but I never could. I would just tell myself that it must be my imagination. That night, we all went into the jungle. It was a jungle tour. It was very dark, and I got separated from the group and found myself alone, surrounded by trees. I called out to my friends, but no one heard me. Suddenly, I bumped into someone, a girl it seemed, and I apologized. When I turned around to look at her, I was shocked to see, well, myself, or my double. It was as if I was looking in a mirror. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm Charlotte," she replied simply. "That's impossible. I'm Charlotte," I said assertively. "Are you with us here at the campsite?" "Yes," she said. I asked her which way back to the campsite. She pointed in one direction and we headed back. As we were walking, her phone rang. It was her father. He was worried about her and was just making sure she was okay. We arrived at our tents without incidents, and I said, "It was really nice to meet you, Charlotte. I'll see you tomorrow." I felt a strong connection to the girl for some reason. Then I realized that I had forgotten my bag, and I went to get it. And again, I had that ominous feeling that I'm being watched. Suddenly, something hit me on the head. When I woke up, I found myself sitting in a car, surrounded by people wearing sunglasses, and I was really frightened. "Who are you people?" I demanded to know. "And what do you want from me?" One man told me that my dad was the reason they kidnapped me. When I told him that my dad had died a long time ago, he just laughed. Then he sprayed something on my face and I lost consciousness. When I woke up later, the other Charlotte was tied up beside me. One of the men seemed confused, seeing two of me, and he asked his boss which of us was the girl they were looking for. Suddenly, I heard someone shout, "Freeze! Don't move!" The police had come. They came out from the tree line. Surrounding the car, they arrested the men. Then they untied us both. Someone appeared looking very worried. The other Charlotte started coming too, and asked where she was and what was going on. Then she saw her dad, and she ran to him. Her dad then looked at me and asked for my name and my mother's name. When I told him, he said he knew who I was. and said to send his regards to my mom and to tell her that he was still keeping her secret. Then he gave me a medal and hugged me, saying that he wasn't sure if we would ever meet again. I was still staring at him, looking confused, so he smiled and he asked me where my father was, and I told him that my father was dead. And then he said that that was their agreement, he and my mom, that he was only trying to protect me and the other Charlotte, who happened to be my twin sister. He said he got into some trouble in his line of work. Some people threatened to kill us, so he and my mom decided to split us up. She took you, and I took your twin sister, he said. We did this to keep you safe. I named your twin Charlotte, just the same as you. I was still feeling a bit overwhelmed at this point. This was preposterous. I couldn't believe it. Suddenly, I heard someone calling me. Charlotte, wake up! It's time for a trip. You must have been having a nightmare because you were screaming. I woke up to find myself in the tent with my friend. When I went outside the tent, I stopped. Right in front of me, staring me in the eyes, was a girl who was my mirror image. Hi, my name is Laura. I'm 23 years old, and I teach art. I recently got married to the love of my life, Norman. I considered him my friend, my brother, my son, and my husband. We loved to prank each other, even after we got married. For instance, one time, I turned off all the lights in the apartment, dressed up as a monster, and scared the living daylights out of him when he came back from the store. Another time, he damaged my car. I put mayonnaise on his toast. I did worry sometimes that our jokes might go too far. I mean, he did get really mad at me once. He stopped talking to me for 2 days, even though I apologized profusely many times. After that, our pranks sort of stopped. I figured our pranking days were over. About a month later, I returned home to find a letter on the floor. I opened it and read it. If you don't pay us 100,000 by Friday, we will kill Norman. I smiled. Norman was pranking me again. When he returned home, I hugged him and showed him his prank letter. He read it carefully, and his brow furrowed. He appeared seriously frightened and swore that this was not part of any prank. He told me that we needed to leave town as soon as possible. I asked him why, and he told me that before he married me, he had stolen a gold statue from a motorcycle gang. I asked him why he couldn't just return it with an apology, and he told me that the statue was worth a lot of money and could make us really wealthy. That night, an armed masked burglar broke into our apartment and confronted us with a gun. He said to Norman, "Hello, Norman, long time no see. You need to choose between the statue or your wife. Choose now." Norman was hesitant. Then he steadfastly said, "I can't give up the statue. Take my wife." The masked man turned towards me. He pointed the gun at me in a threatening manner. I was frantic. I was staring at Norman in shock. Suddenly, the masked man ripped off his mask. It was Keanu, Norman's brother. Norman sat down, laughing so hard he could hardly stop to breathe. Between laughs, he said, "This is payback for the last prank of yours. I was so mad at him that day, but it's all right. He doesn't know what I have planned for him." I don't know where to begin. I don't want to live alone. I'm fed up. I need someone to talk to laugh with, to play with. I've been lonely since birth. My name is Bella, and I'm 10 years old. And this is my story. I lived with my parents in a nice, quiet neighborhood. My father was an engineer, and my mother was a housewife. Father used to travel a lot, but my mom always stayed home with me. Father was always busy. Whenever I asked him to play with me, he'd play with me for a while. Then he'd get a phone call and leave me by myself. Mother was always worried about me. She feared everything on the street, from friends to neighbors. My neighborhood didn't have any kids for me to play with. My parents used to fight a lot. I often saw Mother with her face colored blackish blue. Whenever I would ask her about it, she wouldn't reply. I didn't have any friends because Mother didn't want me to have any. I guess she was afraid they would hurt me. I don't know. One time, my parents were sitting together, and I asked Father why I didn't have any brothers or sisters. He told me to ask Mother, but Mother would just sit there silently, without answering. Later, There came a time when father grabbed mother and began beating her. I tried to pull him away from her, screaming, "Leave her alone! Let her go!" He slapped me hard, and I fell down. The last thing I heard before I lost consciousness was my mom screaming. I woke up later in the hospital to see my mom crying. She asked me if I was okay, and I nodded. When we returned home, my father wasn't there. I asked Mom where he was, but she simply said that he left on a very long business trip. I was feeling a little sad, but Mom surprised me with a doll. This was the first time that Mom had ever given me a doll. She said that doll would be like my little sister. I hugged it tightly and said to it, "Nancy, you and I are going to be the best sisters ever." Mom often left me with Nancy when she had to go out to do business. It was okay, though. I felt that Nancy could understand me whenever I spoke to her. Time passed quickly. One day, Mom came home tired and went to sleep on the couch. I made a tent in my room where I collected all of my toys and played with Nancy. I was speaking to Nancy and telling her how beautiful she was and how I felt lucky to have her as a sister. Then I asked her, "Nancy, do you know why Father left us?" Miraculously, Nancy answered me, saying, "Father left you because he never really loved you to begin with." I was shocked and took 2 steps back. Then I said with a trembling voice, "Nancy, you can speak?" Nancy answered and said, "Of course. Can't all dolls?" From that moment on, Nancy and I lived in our own private little world. We didn't let anyone know about this. It was our secret. Once, when we were sitting alone, Nancy said to me, "Bella, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" I asked. Then she said the strangest thing. "You have to leave this world because you deserve a better one." That didn't make sense. Actually, it felt more like a threat. It frightened me, and I called for Mom. When she came in, I told her what Nancy had just said to me. She replied saying, "Nonsense, Bella. Nancy is just a doll. She can't talk. Maybe you're just tired. Get some sleep." So I tried to sleep, but Nancy wouldn't let me sleep. She left me alone until midnight, then she woke me up. She put her hand over my mouth and whispered, "Please listen to me. Don't scream, okay?" she said. "I know all your fears, your father's cruelty, your loneliness, your love for me, how your love and belief in me transformed me from a toy to a sentient doll. I really love you, Bella, and I want you to be happy." Her words calmed me down, and I said, "You're right, Nancy. So what do we do then?" She explained her plan to me. "In 2 days' time, we'll run away from home to a place called Toyland, where we'll meet some great friends." Whenever Mom was busy with work, I would speak and laugh with Nancy. And whenever Mom would enter the room and ask me who I was speaking to, I would laugh and point at Nancy. I could see in Mom's eyes that she was beginning to worry about me. One day, as Nancy and I were preparing our stuff to escape, we were looking at a map we had prepared. Then, unexpectedly, Mom came into the room. She saw the map and asked me about it. I looked at Nancy, and she gestured with her eyes that I shouldn't say anything. Seeing this, Mom took Nancy and threw her into the trash can. I screamed and pleaded. That was all I remember.
Let me be honest with you guys. I'm not a fan of first dates. I've only had a couple of good first dates, others are plain disasters. However, from time to time, I like to get on Tinder and swipe between pictures. Tinder dates always turn into funny stories, sometimes even spooky ones. My guy best friend Ryan and I decided to go on a few Tinder dates just for the fun of it. Before we went out, we would always agree on a safe word, and that word was hot dog. A text saying, "Hey, can you pick up some hot dogs on the way?" Or something along those lines basically meant, "Can you call me and pretend there's an emergency so I can get out of this situation without being rude?" We had a lot of safe words meaning different things, and had an unspoken rule that every time we were on a date, we would let the other person know. I met this guy called Brandon on the application. We had a few good chats and decided to go out for brunch. I called Ryan and I let him know that I'll be having brunch with this Brandon guy. I'm not a supermodel, but I'm a bit too picky when it comes to first date outfits. I dived into my closet and decided to wear a bright pink off shoulders blouse and a tiny little white skirt. And of course, my signature mermaid hue high heels. Brandon texted me saying he knows of a nice Italian restaurant. Despite the fact that we were going out for brunch, I somehow agreed to Italian. The guy comes to pick me up for our brunch date. He looks nice with lots of black on. He says he needs to make a stop along the way. I couldn't really seem to disagree. I mean, he clearly forgot to buy me flowers. So I say it's fine and he can make a stop along the way. He pulls up to a gravesite and I see people and I'm like, okay, maybe he's picking something up from someone. Or maybe he works here and needs to do something. What was really going through my mind though is what the heck is he doing and why is he bringing me to a gravesite on a first date? I just waited in the car, especially since there's mourning people nearby and I'm wearing a bright pink outfit. He gets out of the car and opens up the passenger side door. I tell him something along the lines of, I don't want to draw attention to myself and I'll just wait here. And he says something along the lines of, don't worry, you look great. They will love you. Despite my pink outfit and my high heels, Brandon was very well built. He was very tall and had broad shoulders. One could easily tell that he is into martial arts. So I wasn't very worried about my safety. However, I was really worried about his mental health. I'm not even kidding. I was so very curious about what on earth were we doing there at 10 a.m. on a first date. And who is they, as in, they love you. Okay, so the next part is a bit hard to define whether it was creepy, surreal, or a prank show. It was his mother's funeral. I stood next to a group of weeping people watching as my date's mother was lowered into the ground. Needless to say, it was really, really awkward, especially since he kept trying to hold my hand and nuzzle me for comfort. It's a first date, for God's sake. I waited for the service to be over, as I didn't want to be rude to the grieving people or to the dead woman. And then I texted Ryan, hot dog. So Ryan called me and pretended to be my landlord and told me that my apartment was flooded. I quickly apologized to Brandon and called an Uber. While I was waiting for my Uber to arrive, Brandon kept on holding my hand and literally begging me to stay a little bit longer. He also said we could still go out for brunch, but I politely said we could reschedule for another time. I think his cousins or something were standing too close. He told them that we've been dating for a few weeks and they should talk me into staying. I was so glad that my Uber finally arrived. I hopped inside the car like a freaking ninja. I called Ryan and asked him to come over. We stayed together, and honestly, I've never laughed as much as Ryan made me laugh that night. And guess what? Ryan and I realized we were actually in love a few weeks later. We gave up online dating and we've been together ever since.
I don't really like Indian movies because the actors are always overreacting, and the movies are not logical at all. But this is just my personal opinion. However, I've discovered that there are stories stranger than Indian movies. Let me give you a real life example. I'll tell you a story about a young woman named Samantha. Samantha was a beautiful girl with blonde hair and green eyes. She lived with her grandmother after her parents died in a horrible car accident. The whole country read about it. She had many friends, and all the neighbors liked her. They considered her the most beautiful girl in town. Many had proposed to her, but she didn't care much for them. One day, Samantha was walking alone down the street. after visiting one of her friends. Suddenly, she had an eerie feeling that someone was following her. She began running and crying for help. Her follower began running and stopped her. He was an ugly man, pointing a knife in her direction. He asked her to hand over her purse. She threw it at him and made a run for it. The man said wait and made to stop her, but another man appeared out of nowhere and punched the thief, who fell unconscious. The brave and good Samaritan picked up Samantha's purse and handed it to her. He was very handsome, with green eyes, soft hair, and an amazing smile. He escorted her back home, and she felt that he was her knight in shining armor. She went inside and hugged her grandmother tight, who was a little surprised but smiled. Samantha was so happy that she gently pulled her grandmother to her feet, and they whirled around and danced playfully. The very next day, she was surprised when she answered the doorbell. Steve, the tall, handsome man, was standing there, holding flowers. He proposed to her, and she said yes. Thus began their love story. Then one day, Samantha was standing in the kitchen preparing dinner. Steve and her grandmother were out, but they were supposed to be back soon. Samantha had everything ready, and she set the table. The house door opened, and Steve walked in. Samantha went to greet him, but she felt dizzy and fainted. Steve quickly took her to the hospital. The doctor congratulated Steve, saying that he was going to be a father. Steve was ecstatic, but Samantha was not. Instead, she was shocked and nervous. She said that she was too young to have kids, that she wasn't ready to be a mother. Steve was taken aback and said, "But why? Don't you want him?" Things were different from that point on. Samantha tried to get an abortion several times, but Steve was always stopping her. She couldn't accept it. She blamed Steve, but Steve couldn't understand her. In her 7th month of pregnancy, Samantha was with her grandmother at the supermarket when she saw a small boy run onto the road. Fearing he might get run over by a car, Samantha quickly pulled the boy off the road to safety. The boy's mother saw what happened and thanked Samantha, feeling so grateful and relieved. Samantha was crying at the moment and replied, "No need to thank me. I'm going to be a mother like you soon." For the first time, she was beginning to feel real affection for the baby. "Forgive me," she silently thought to herself. She tried to contact Steve many times to tell him that she had finally accepted. She was ready to become a mother, but he never responded. Finally, the day had come. Samantha went to the hospital to give birth. After the surgery, she was very tired. Nevertheless, when she woke up, she immediately asked for the baby. Her grandmother handed her the child. It was a daughter, and she was so beautiful. The nurse tried to take the baby out of her arms, but Samantha refused, wanting to hold her for as long as she could. The next day, Samantha heard a big commotion, and she had a feeling of dread that something bad had just happened. It was confirmed when she saw her grandmother's face. She asked what had happened, and her grandmother told her that a child was missing and had apparently been kidnapped. Samantha's pale face slowly pleaded, "Please don't tell me that it was my daughter." When her grandmother nodded, Samantha broke down and began crying and wailing in pain. The nurses tried to calm her down, and when she did, her grandmother came over to her and handed her a note. It had been found in her missing daughter's hospital crib. It was in Steve's handwriting. It simply said, "If you don't want her, I do." Then Samantha fainted. For many years she tried finding her baby, but couldn't. Steve and her daughter had vanished into thin air. She felt as if time had stopped for her, but Steve didn't feel that way. He raised their daughter into a beautiful young woman. He named her Margot. Whenever Margot asked about her mother, Steve would always tell her that her mother was dead, but he often told her stories about her mother and how much he had loved her. Margot's intuition, however, told her that her father wasn't being completely honest with her and that he was hiding some big dark secret. One day, Steve fell ill unexpectedly. He called Margot to him and told her that he was very sick and felt that he was going to die soon. He said that he wanted to reveal a secret that he had long kept from her, that her mother was actually alive, and that her name was Samantha. He told her that he had kidnapped her from the hospital at birth because her mother did not want a child. He regretted it and asked Margot to forgive him. He gave her Samantha's address, and soon after, he died. After his death, Margot decided to go looking for her mother. I am Margot, and I am now standing at my mother's address. At her front door, I cannot predict my mother's reaction when she answers the door and I introduce myself as her daughter, but I'm going to hug her and tell her that I've missed her for so long. He was a dream, the future, or so I thought. But my love was cursed right from the start. Sounds a bit confusing, right? Let me explain. But first, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Carolyn. I was a dreamer. I dreamed of a good, warm, stable, successful life. I wanted a good job. And I wanted to travel around the world a bit with Helen. She was my best friend. We virtually shared the same dreams and hobbies and interests and lifestyles. We've been friends since we were kids. People often thought that we were sisters. I did too, in fact. She even got jealous if anyone tried to get close to me. Every day, Helen and I worked a little more towards our dreams. Once, when Helen and I were traveling with some of our friends, we had a problem with the hostess on the plane. A gentleman intervened and cleverly solved our problems. His name was Danny. I liked him. A lot. I thought about him often. But whenever I talked to Helen about him, she told me that he was not as amazing as I seemed to think he was. Coincidentally, I met him again at a party of a mutual friend. We talked together till daylight. I told Helen about our encounter, and she expressed her wishes that my love story would have a happy ending. I similarly told her that I hoped she would find the love of her life someday too. Everything would be okay, we figured. Then, one day, I received a letter in our mailbox. It was in weird handwriting, as if the writer had written it with a trembling hand. I opened it curiously. It said that my love for Danny would become a curse if I didn't give him up and get him out of my life. What nonsense, I thought. Whose idea of a silly joke was this? I immediately called Danny and Helen to tell them about the letter. Danny laughed, but Helen was worried and suggested that I should be careful from now on. That same day, Danny had a horrible car accident, but fortunately he wasn't hurt. A detective investigating the case determined that his car brakes had been tampered with. In another incident, a car almost hit me, but it swerved away at the last minute. When I mentioned this incident to Danny, he tried to calm me down and told me to just forget about it. He gave me a beautiful bracelet as a present and proposed. We got engaged, and I couldn't have been happier. I wanted to show the bracelet to Helen, but somehow I seemed to have lost it. I couldn't find it anywhere. Anyway, when I told Helen about his proposal, she was thrilled for me. I spent days shopping for just the right wedding dress. I was so busy with preparations that I forgot all about the ominous letter. I went to the wedding hall early to make sure that everything was ready and prepared. Helen was helping me, and Danny kept calling me to make sure I was all right. Suddenly, the lights went out. I called out to Helen, worried that she might have tripped and fallen when the lights were out. When the lights came back on, Helen had fainted, and my dress had disappeared. I screamed to the ceiling, "What do you want from me? Leave me alone!" Suddenly, Danny appeared out of nowhere and asked me what had happened. I told him then and there that we must break off our engagement, otherwise the curse the letter mentioned might injure someone or cause someone to die. Then Helen came too and tried to calm me down. She told me to go to the car and that she would get our stuff and follow me. I loved Danny and wanted to marry him, but now I was seriously worried that this curse threat might actually be real. Helen came back carrying a bag and a large suitcase and told Danny not to worry, that she would drive me home and then call him to tell him that we had arrived safely. I was still crying, and Helen was trying to calm me down. When we arrived home, I noticed something strange. Helen was carrying a bag that was partially open, and I glimpsed a piece of clothing stuffed into it. It looked exactly like my dress. I opened the bag and found that it was my dress. I confronted Helen and demanded to know how my missing dress ended up in her bag. I clearly caught her red-handed, and she was unable to answer coherently. I realized at that moment that the source of the so-called curse was Helen. "Helen," I said, "how dare you do this to me? I thought we were like sisters to each other." She replied icily, with a glare that I saw for the first time. She said that she fell in love with Danny just as I did, but he chose me instead of her, and that she hated me for it. She said she won him over and got him to love her instead. Then they both tried to scare me into calling off the wedding so that she and Danny could be together. There are no words to describe how I felt at the time. I replied in a similar tone. I told her that I don't ever want to see her again, or Danny. Neither of them mattered anymore. I never did see Helen or Danny after that day. I'm on a Caribbean island now, sipping on a cocktail. I read in the paper that Danny and Helen had announced their engagement. I'm thinking about what wedding present I should give them, as a surprise. Hello, I'm Sarah. Ever heard of a phobia before? Don't worry, it's not contagious or anything. It just means you're scared of something in particular. Places, people, things. I have a phobia, but I don't like to talk about it, and I definitely don't want to be seen in that state. I was in my second year at college. I had been very busy that semester because we had a lot of assignments, and it was fine. I mean, I liked studying and completing tasks, but I was never a nerd or a geek. No. I like to dress nicely too. I have my own fashion and style. It wasn't easy making friends though. There were two types of people at my school: smart nerds who couldn't care less how they dress, and complete airheads who dressed nice. I didn't fit in either one of those groups, so I basically kept to myself until one day I got assigned to do a task with a girl and a boy, Jane and Kyle. They didn't look nerdy at all, and I thought to myself, oh great, looks like I'll be doing all the work. But when we started talking about the project, they didn't just sit there or toss ridiculous retorts. All three of us were having an actual conversation about the topic. I was so thrilled. It finally seemed like I belonged somewhere. We became friends and did everything together. We could tell each other anything. Well, not everything. I had one secret from my friends. I never told them I had a phobia. Anyway, a year later, Jane moved to Germany with her parents. She was going to finish college there. So it was just Kyle and I now. All through college, we were the best of friends. We even did our graduation project together. On graduation day, Kyle and I were supposed to go out for dinner. He wouldn't tell me where, said it was a surprise. And what a surprise it was. He had picked the highest tower in the whole city to eat dinner at the very top. I don't have a problem with high places in particular. In fact, I'm sure I'll love the view if I ever make it to the top. No, I had a problem with the elevator. A phobia, to be precise. So we were standing at the base of the tower, and Kyle was happily listing all the great features and restaurants up there, but I didn't hear any of it. I was too busy fretting, frozen to the spot, desperately trying to find a way out of the situation. I couldn't say no to Kyle, who was all excited to go up the tower, so I clenched it in and tried my best to stay calm. We got in the elevator, and the doors shut. I couldn't control what came after that. I was terrified, screaming and shouting hysterically, banging on the walls, then falling to the ground. Of course, I don't actually remember any of it. Kyle told me later on. The last thing I remember was the elevator doors shutting close. When I came to, I was at the hospital. Kyle was sitting by my bed looking worried. When he saw that I woke up and that I was feeling fine, he started laughing at me, saying, "Why didn't you tell me you had a phobia?" I felt ridiculous and started laughing too. And then, out of nowhere, he proposed. It was his plan all along, although he pictured it at the top of the tower. All that happened 3 years ago. We're married now, and we have a baby girl. I'm being treated for my phobia. It's not completely gone, but I'm way better now. Apparently, hiding my problems never solves them. I'll have to face them, sooner or later. There are different kinds of pranks. Some are funny, some are boring, and some have serious consequences. My small innocent prank turned into a horror movie. Let me tell you why. My name is Anita, and I'm 14 years old. I live with my parents and my brother Victor. Victor is 3 years younger than me. We are also close friends. I love reading, writing stories, and most of all, playing pranks on people. I just love to do it. Victor was the cowardly sort, afraid of his own shadow, so I always played pranks on him. His terrified reactions always made me laugh. Whenever he would try to play a prank on me in retaliation, though, I would always see through it immediately. My parents used to spend Halloween at my aunt's house. So, one day, I decided to scare him by dressing up like a ghost and hiding in his closet. When he came home and called for me, I didn't reply. He entered his room and opened his closet to hang his coat, only to be confronted by me jumping out and screaming boo in his face. He leapt backwards, wide-eyed and terrified. He screamed like a girl. I was rolling on the floor, laughing. If he wasn't such a coward, I wouldn't have had any fun at home. One day, he joked, your pranks are going to be the death of me. When he turned 17, Victor received a scholarship to the state university. I saw him off with tears in my eyes, hugged him, and gave him a present marked "Don't open until you arrive at your dormitory." Shortly after he arrived, he video called. He had blue powder all over his face and looked hilarious. He said, "Very funny, ha ha ha. You have to stop these pranks, sis. We're too old for this stuff now." Oh, how I missed him. I laughed. With him gone, everything was so boring. When October came and Halloween was only a few days away, the doorbell rang, and I opened the door to find a letter lying on our doorstep. I opened it and found a picture of Victor. His face had been beaten black and blue. He looked horrible. I opened the letter and read, "Victor got involved in drug dealing and now owes us a lot of money. If you don't pay off his debt as soon as possible, we will kill him, and you too. Do not call the police, or he will only die sooner." Panicked, I called the thug's phone number, written at the end of the letter, but there was no answer. Victor was such a sweet and innocent guy. I couldn't believe he had gotten himself involved in drug dealing. I thought of calling my parents, but I decided not to, because they would definitely call the police. So I spent the next 2 days thinking. Then, the home phone rang, and I felt my heart sink to my feet. I slowly picked up the receiver. "Do you have the money?" the caller asked in a cold voice. "I need more time. I don't have that much money," I pleaded. The voice replied, "You seem to think we are joking. Okay, the next photo we send you will be that of your brother's dead body." He said that. Then he hung up the phone. My stomach wrenched. I felt sick and tried to call my parents, but I couldn't reach them. The next day, I heard a knock on the door, and when I opened it, there was another note lying on the doorstep. It read, "The angel of death comes today." My parents were at my aunt's. I was alone and didn't know what to do. I closed all the windows and curtains and locked all the doors. I turned off the lights. At the stroke of midnight, I heard a noise outside my house. I peeked out a window and saw a man, all in black, in my front yard. He was walking towards the back of the house. Shortly after that, I heard the back door open. I ran and hid myself in the closet. Eventually, I heard my bedroom door open slowly. I heard footsteps walking around my room, as if the intruder were searching for me. Suddenly, my closet door opened. I panicked, pushed the masked intruder, and dashed out of my room and down the hall to the dining room. Victor's decapitated head was on the table. Oh my God. My last thought before I fainted was that if the drug dealers were going to kill me too, just as they promised. Goodbye, life, I thought. When I woke up, I saw my parents and Victor, dressed in black. They all began laughing hysterically. Angry, I snapped. "What's going on? Why are you all laughing? This isn't funny." Victor confessed between laughs. "It was just a prank, sis. And you should have seen the look on your face when I opened the closet door." From that day on, I never played pranks on anyone ever again.
It all happened on my last holiday. It was a terrible experience. It was the worst holiday I have ever had. Me and my friend Renee, we decided to go to New Zealand. We were saving money for a very long time to go on this trip. It was our dream to go to the land of the Lord of the Rings. We had made reservations for flight at the end of July, and from that moment on, everything went wrong. It turned out that the flight was reserved for only one person, simply because a woman at the travel agency didn't understand us very well. I managed to reserve a flight, but a different one, so we couldn't go together. But I thought that it was not a big deal. My friend flew a few hours after me. I was going first. When I arrived at the airport, I was very happy because that meant that my holiday has just started and that nothing else could happen. And I was mistaken. When the hour of my flight was coming, I queued up to the custom clearance. My passport was right, and the next thing I had to do was to go through the metal detector. When I was passing through, it started to beep. I was so scared. I was taken aside immediately, and I felt like a thief. It was terrible. The custom officer had taken me to another room and she told me to undress. I tried to explain that I had a belly ring and maybe it was the cause of the beeping, but she didn't want to listen. I had to undress. They took my clothes somewhere else, and I was standing alone in the middle of the room. I was shocked and stressed. The woman came back after about 5 minutes, which seemed to be ages for me. She gave me back my clothes, but I was not allowed to put them on. She checked me one more time with a small metal detector, which was obviously beeping in front of my belly ring. Of course, the custom officials went through all of my things, but they didn't find anything. I was late for my flight, so I had to wait for another one. My friend was supposed to meet me at the airport, and it was me who should be waiting for her. She was terrified that I was not there, but fortunately, she decided to wait. After that horrible flight, we met at the airport and we went to our hostel. It turned out that we expected something different, but it was not that bad, and we were too tired to look for something else. New Zealand is the most beautiful country I have ever seen, and we loved everything about it. The people, their customs, their food, basically everything, and the entire environment. We spent 3 weeks there. We had a really good time, but when the time ended, we had to fly back home. I was a little bit scared. This time, I decided to remove my belly ring. We came to the airport about 3 hours before the departure time. At the entrance to the airport, we saw an older woman who had a large card with the word written on it with capital letters Poland. So I came up to her and I started to speak in Polish. She smiled and we started to chat together. When we were just about to leave, she asked me if I could take a box of chocolates with me and give it to her son in Poland. He was supposed to meet me at the airport because she would phone him. And of course, I agreed. And then it started again. At the custom clearance, everything was okay. I came through the metal detector and nothing happened. My passport was alright. I was almost free when the custom officer asked me about the chocolates. I said that it was given to me by the lady at the entrance and that her son is going to take it back at the airport in Poland. The custom officer asked me to open the box. I didn't want to agree as it was not mine, but I had to. It turned out that inside there were not chocolates, but cocaine worth $20,000. I was taken to jail. I spent 2 days there and then everything had been explained. I could come back home and the lady and her son were caught and also taken to jail. I don't have to explain why this was the worst holiday ever. Hey, my name is Monica, and in 5th grade, we went to the Orlando Science Center for a field trip. I was excited for multiple reasons. One, I was a huge science lover. Two, my teacher was an absolute bully whom I hated, and luckily could get away from for most of the day. She would make up lies and get me in trouble with my parents and then smirk the next day when she saw bruises on me. But lastly, I had found out that the day before my crush and I were going to be in the same group of 7, guided by a parent known for not caring too much about what you do as long as you don't die. My crush Sam was absolutely beautiful, a sweet boy who was blessed well by puberty over the summer. His shoulders wide, his waist slim, his hair was a brilliant ginger shade, complemented by his jade green eyes and cute dark freckles, carefully painted across the bridge of his nose. He was quick on his feet and just as quick to make a joke. And let's be honest, who can resist a cute redhead, boy or girl? Not me. We get off the bus, and Sam and I immediately dive into the beauty that was the Orlando Science Center. I had no idea he was a fellow nerd. We were casual friends, enough not to make things awkward, but not enough to know much about each other. So discovering he adored science was great for me. I remember messing with pulley systems with him, venturing through the human body floor and making terrible puns along the way. He rubbed his hands along the giant ball of electricity on one floor and immediately rubbed it on my head to try and get my hair to stand on end. and I couldn't help but notice how his hand stayed on my collarbone a bit too long after. Lunch came and I looked at my stomach was fluttering the entirety of the trip, and I could even fathom eating with how jittery it was. Mrs. Sergeant, my bitch-ass teacher, demanded to know why I wasn't eating, and was unsatisfied by I'm not hungry. You won't get to leave the room until you eat something. Everything. The planetarium is next. You better eat if you want to go and see the movie, she sneered, and stuck to her words, forcing me to down the raisins. I hate them, and chocolate milk. I'm lactose intolerant, but finally I was freed, back to an excited Sam. Now, for anyone who does not know what a planetarium is, it's a giant dome-shaped theater. Imagine walking outside, looking up, and the sky was playing A Bug's Life or something. It was just like that. It was absolutely beautiful. This trip included a showing about the stars above, the constellations, light pollution, all the fun facts. Sam was a huge space lover, planned on working at NASA eventually, and succeeded last time I checked Facebook, and was entirely geeked out about this showing. I was inspired by his love for it and became excited as well. I simply wanted to watch him fawn over the showing. It's too cute when people do that. We found our seats and we were immediately plunged into a darkness I didn't even know was possible. I sat back in the uncomfortable chair, encased in the crazy spins and stomach-lurching turns as the show shot us through the cosmos. The narrator had a smooth, deep voice similar to the great Morgan Freeman himself. But it couldn't trump the soft squeaks my crush expelled as he whispered space facts to me, the cool tip of his nose touching my blushing cheek. He was so close, going on about black holes, tying it all off with an excited, "Isn't it amazing?" whispered in my ear. I mumbled an agreement, my stomach full of butterflies, threatening to burst through the show and disrupt everything. Was it too hot in there, or was it just me? I finally worked up the courage to look at Sam, noses touching. The scene around us lit with thousands of stars, gently illuminating his face, yet reflecting brilliantly in his eyes. After a moment, he whispered, "I think it's beautiful." And I could tell he was not talking about the stars. He moved, millimeters being covered at a snail's pace closer to my mouth. This was going to be my first kiss, and I couldn't imagine a better scene as a kid. Just me, a cute boy, and a sky full of stars. I was so excited. I could feel nerves build up in my throat and the butterflies in my stomach. Wait, no, those were not nerves. Instead, I proceeded to retch, causing Sam to lean away before vomiting in his fucking lap. The heat, fluttering stomach, all the beginning of a stomach bug, which was given fuel when I ate lunch. I vomited in my crush's lap, guys. I honestly hope Sam doesn't remember me like ever. To those asking, I remember this in detail because not only was it so goddamn traumatic, but it was one of the best days of my life as well. It ignited a love for science for me, plus, who could forget an entire day you got to spend with your crush? And yeah, I stalked him on Facebook to see what he does now. Nothing too major, if I remember. He actually simply works at the NASA Visitors Center, helping hosting school trips and stuff, but he still sort of followed his dream.
I don't follow the news much. International crisis, crimes, kidnapping, all these things just fill me with dismay. It's as if our world is a dangerous jungle. And I don't like that feeling, because I'm a peaceful girl who likes to avoid trouble. Little did I know that my peaceful world was going to be shaken by one of these sad events. I'm Marcia, and I'm 18 years old. I live with my parents and my little sister Marilyn. My mother often warned me to be alert and avoid dangerous situations. She told me that peaceful people can live in a peaceful world if they choose to do so, but that wasn't entirely true. I was at a friend's birthday party once, and we were laughing, eating, playing, and having a great time. I wasn't paying attention to my phone much, but when I chanced to look at it, I saw that Mom had called me over 1,000,000 times around midnight. She was clearly worried about me being out so late, so I decided that I needed to rush home. I was afraid to take a taxi alone, but I needed to hurry home. So I walked out to the main street, which was very dimly lit, and saw a taxi nearby. But when I got closer to it, I saw that all its windows were tinted, and I didn't feel at ease. I made to look for another one, but then the taxi driver opened the front door and smiled. His elderly age and his friendly smile disarmed me and gave me a lulling sense of security. So I asked him to take me to my home, and I jumped into the back seat. He asked me why I was walking alone on a dimly lit street that late at night, and I told him about the party and my losing track of time. He warned me not to walk late at night again because that was a dangerous time to be about. He asked me if I had heard about the serial killer named Bradley. I said that I did, but that I didn't know what he looked like. At that point, he laughed, and I heard the 4 doors suddenly lock themselves. He looked at me and said, "My name is Bradley. Now you know what I look like. It's so nice to meet you." I screamed for him to stop the taxi and let me out. He stated simply that the simple mistakes can have the largest impact on our lives sometimes. He boasted that I would be a perfect addition to complete his skull collection. In a panic, I grabbed his seatbelt and began strangling him with it. I demanded that he stop the car, but he refused. I began choking him harder and harder until he eventually lost control of the car. The car careened off the road, flipped a few times, and landed upside down. Luckily, I was still conscious and was able to get out of the overturned car. He tried to grab me as I was crawling out, but I managed to escape. I ran back up the main road and flagged a car carrying a family in it. Once I reached home, I relayed my horrendous experience to Mom, and she took me to the police station. After listening to my story and my description of the guy, the police promised to investigate and to catch the criminal as soon as possible. That experience scarred me for life, but I know now that I have to be strong if I am to live on. Some days later, I received a message from an anonymous sender that said, "Be ready for the next ramble. You haven't seen the last of me yet."